This is the Authentic Change Podcast, and I am Mike Horne. Authenticity reflects what we want from each other and our organizations: open communication, trust, community, fun, and opportunity. I want to help you to do your best in your personal and professional relationships. This podcast delivers expertise, insights, and approaches on authentic leadership, to live your purpose, to lead from your values, to establish connected relationships, to steward people and culture change, to build and sustain prosperity, and to open doors and possibilities. This podcast will assist you in paving the way forward to personal, team, and organizational prosperity. Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast with Mike Horne. I am absolutely delighted today to have as our podcast guest, Leanne Bernhardt. Leanne is the Chief Human Resources Officer for Xactly, the leader in revenue intelligence solutions. I met Leanne many years ago when I was at a company called Nortel Networks, which was at the time Canada's largest private employer. But Leanne has gone on to do amazing things since our time at Nortel Networks. She's an accomplished executive. She's got a super successful career working in the SaaS and high-tech hardware industries. At Xactly, Leanne's responsible for attracting the best talent to accelerate continued growth and for implementing creative programs that engage, develop, and retain employees. She leads the HR organization at Xactly. She has extensive private equity and public company experience, including public and private BOD experience, board of directors experience, and at the compensation committee. I've always known Leanne to be an innovative, creative, and caring HR leader who is able to drive change and scale organizations and provide the strategic vision for people and culture that supports business acceleration. Leanne's had lots of senior HR leadership roles at different companies. And I won't say lots, but she's had quite a few. Bay Networks, Brocade Communication Systems, Seagate Technology Company. I am absolutely delighted to have Leanne here with us today to talk about the subject of integrity and authenticity. She's been a person in human resources and in people and culture who has lit up my world, made me see what's possible and practical in organizations. And I'm just delighted to welcome Leanne Bernhardt to Authentic Change with Mike Horne. Leanne, would you say a few words about yourself?
Well, first of all, thank you, Mike. It is a pleasure. And we do go way back. We've worked together twice in our careers, in our HR organizations, and it's been an absolute pleasure working with you and learning from you. I'm delighted to be here. And, all of the things that you said are true, which is great. Human resources is my chosen career. I have loved every minute of it. I fell into it a little bit by accident and have along the way have had, tremendous experiences at the companies that I've worked for.
Leanne, as a human resources leader, I think we often, or many in the human resources field, I don't think we struggle with authenticity. But it is a challenge to, find people who are not only happy about themselves, but happy about the opportunities that are in front of them. And I wonder, as a human resources leader, as a people and culture leader over several organizations and leading one today, what are some of the words that come to mind when you describe authenticity or when you hear your colleagues talk about authenticity?
Yeah, I think one thing that comes to mind pretty clearly is bringing your true self. And I know that we, talked a little bit before today, and we were talking about my journey around authenticity. And there was a time when I was pretty separate between work and my home life. And there isn't anything, dramatically exciting about my home or my personal life, but I always learned, for whatever reason, that you never blend the two. And I remember, pretty early or maybe midway through my career, that when you show your authentic self to the people that you work with or even for, you're able to build stronger relationships. And I think that's really important, is bringing your whole self. And my goodness, how exhausting it is and can be to be somebody different at work than you are at home.
Not only difficult and challenging, but what gets left on the table for yourself, for the relationships that you have, and for your company. I mean, just so much gets left on the
Yeah.
table when people aren't able to bring their whole selves to work. It's often a question I ask, and the answer is pretty predictable. I ask people, can you be more authentic at home or can you be more authentic at work? And generally, the answer is, oh, I could be more authentic at home. And I think to your point, Leanne, we've had this belief system that I can separate my work and I can separate my life and put them in two distinct boxes, and never the twain shall meet. But I think every seasoned leader, particularly those leaders in human resources, know that that separation is it's a faulty line. It's not a line that's true for many people. In fact, I don't know what happened to you, 5 minutes ago, or I don't know what happened to you yesterday.
Hmm.
But I do know when I have you in front of me as a colleague, as a coworker, as an employee, that we have an opportunity in the present moment to be fully engaged with that person, and to realize that they do bring what happened 5 minutes ago, what happened yesterday, into this conversation, even though I may be completely unaware of it. I always found that to be one of the challenges in dealing with difficult employee situations, particularly when you're preparing for a termination of an employee, an involuntary termination. Often the human resources leader doesn't know exactly what's going on in that person's life. And yet, we still come to these kinds of experiences with wanting to treat people with respect and dignity. And how do you begin to reconcile those now, Leanne, as an experienced HR leader in a growing company? How do you connect those dots in difficult situations when, things haven't worked out in certain circumstances?
Well, and I don't know if so much this is, when things don't work out, but when we talk about authenticity, or when I think about it, I think about two other words or things or ways to be, and that's being vulnerable. And then there's definitely a trust element. Um, I've learned so much by being more vulnerable with my teams, or with my coworkers or leadership team or even boss, that is showing, you know, more of a human side. And I've gotten so many, you know, positive reaction. I'm a very calm, stoic, person. And so it takes a lot to rattle me. And so sometimes the feedback that I get is, show the human side. You must have bad days. You must get upset. And so I think showing that you're human, particularly with your team, is tremendous. It shows vulnerability, and that increases trust within your organization. And it's so powerful. I didn't know how that worked for so many years until I started trying that out myself, with the team. And it's
Such
very much appreciated.
Such great advice and insight, Leanne, is to be vulnerable in order to grow, to leap, to have people trust you so that you can form the right kinds of outcomes, or the outcomes that most of us expect in organizations. It's not easy for many people to be vulnerable. I think the cue is always, if you, one cue used to be, and I think fortunately for many, this is going away. It used to be, if you don't know it, fake it. That was a mantra in corporate life. And I think today, while it's still important to be prepared, to be present, to work unceasingly and with excellence for your customers and for your colleagues, it's often difficult to let down the shield a little bit and be vulnerable, particularly in relationships where you have a boss, where you're managing people. If you were to give one or two insights into how to increase that vulnerability, what would it take, Leanne? What would be your guidance to others so that we can help them to be successful in their journeys as well?
Yeah, I think one is easy. It's sharing your personal stories, sharing your stories of failure. I make mistakes every day, and it is hard to share when you make a mistake. But everyone makes a mistake. and they probably make multiple mistakes a day. And oftentimes your team thinks that, well, since they don't see them, then they're not happening. But I think that's one. The other piece too, and you kind of reference this, fake it until you make it. But, there's this whole idea of imposter syndrome. And, that's really around doubting your abilities and feeling like you're a fraud. And many people, particularly women, have this whole idea about this imposter syndrome. We talk a lot about diversity and inclusion, and we've rewritten at Xactly our job descriptions to make sure that we take as much bias out of those descriptions. It's well known that a female oftentimes will look at a description, and if they don't meet 100% of what's described in that description, they'll move on to something else. Where a male will, with 60% of an understanding of how that work needs to get done, they'll go for it. So it's this idea of I'm not good enough. And I think helping people educate themselves on what that means and that you are good enough and that, you should go after it, because it does or can disproportionately affect high achieving people. And so those are the two things that I like to talk a lot about when I'm working with my team.
Oh, so important, this idea of being in an environment where your manager can allow you to fail quickly, to fail early, to fail often, and yet still surround you with the success that is so needed in order to make real progress. I think that's a difficult challenge, and I appreciate your insights on how some are particularly geared to say, even if I'm only half of that, I can still move forward, versus the person who says, well, I am only half of that, so I better step backwards. So it's a great way to emphasize, I think, the point around leadership, that leadership is often stepping back without stepping backwards. And how does a leader, accomplish that? And I think one of the great ways to do that is through this idea of vulnerability, because vulnerability encourages people to have trust in us. And trust is one of the basic building blocks in authentic leadership. People have to feel confident that they can bring their whole selves to work. They have to feel that they're not an imposter, that their manager gives them or supports their confidence and their competence. And really, by doing these kinds of things, I always think that when we lead with our values for respect and dignity, that we also bring diverse people and diverse ideas around us in order to grow inclusion. And that becomes so important, I think, in the authentic leader's journey to create inclusive environments. I think much like you're doing at Xactly today, Leanne. Is that right? I mean, what are some of the challenges that you might face in encouraging people to bring more of who they are to what they do?
Well, I think your environment and your culture that you have in place really invites or won't invite that type of behavior. We have a set of core values at Xactly. They spell care, culture, accountability, respect, and excellence. These have been in place for 16 years. We're a 16-year-old company, and it is the basis by which we run the company. And it is practiced throughout what our CEO says, what the leadership team says, how we act within the workplace, and throughout all of our activities. It's very much embedded, those core values, in our culture.
What I love about those core values is they're so easy to remember in the CARE acronym: culture, accountability, respect, and excellence. Just so easy to remember.
Well, and the R in CARE is respect for diversity. So many companies, many CHROs are and have been talking a lot about diversity and inclusion. We've been talking about it for many years. And that is because our core values are set out very clearly. But it is work that needs to be addressed on an ongoing basis. It's not a project. It takes a lot of attention. And diversity, I think, is the easy part, bringing in a diverse set of individuals into your company. And even that's not easy, but formulating a sense of inclusion and belonging, I think, is even the harder aspect of your culture.
Or in what, people often talk about today, they talk about the Jedi mindset, right? How can I bring justice, equity, diversity, and
Mm,
inclusion to my
mm-hmm.
organization? So it's really having that mindset. It's one thing, I agree with you, to attract people, but the values that are at Xactly and the values that you foster around culture and accountability and respect for diversity and excellence, I'm sure that they don't play well with everyone. I'm sure once you're in the organization and you've got the right mechanics, but you also attract people who could be committed to those kinds of values in an organization. Is that right? Or how do you think about that, Leanne?
Yeah, I do think that's right. My job, and believe me, and this is where I am always vulnerable. I am a white female, uh, and so I have not experienced a lot of the things that you know my counterparts, our counterparts from other underserved communities, have experienced. So I learn a lot. I invest a lot in reading, talking to people, talking to our employees. I'm very upfront about what I know and what I don't know. Um, and I think that that helps me connect with the people in our organization, our employees, or even friends outside of work. Um, and I do need to be very vulnerable because I don't get it right every time. And I do misstep and I might use the wrong word. But there are always wonderful people that help educate me on how to maybe say things a little bit differently. Um, and and that's a challenge, but you have to be vulnerable in those types of situations, I think, if you're wanting to make progress moving forward.
I love the idea of accountability. I think it's one of the key factors in living a life with integrity as well, and to think about authenticity in the workplace. When I describe integrity, I'm often thinking about it as the musical notes in life. That integrity is something that's genuine. We describe integrity as when someone is of a whole cloth, or if you're an
Mm,
engineer, you might describe it as structural integrity. Things tend to hold together pretty well, and our integrity gets tested lots of ways and in lots of different experiences over life, whether that's organizational life or personal life. So integrity gets tested throughout its life seasons. Authenticity, though, relates to this feeling of being congruent, that I can match my words, my thoughts, and my actions. And that generally, when I'm congruent, when I've got this um, symmetry in my words, thoughts, and actions, I'm generally happy. And as
hmm
a happier person, the research is clear that you attract happy followers and people who are able to lead. And I think this gets to the issue of accountability, which we talk a lot about in the world of integrity and authentic leadership, being accountable for your words and actions and your thoughts. I was just reading today someone who may be barred from employment at one company because of some comments they wrote in a book several years ago.
mm,
But it's how we really show up in that way. But what I often wonder is, people take personal accountability, but sometimes does that accountability act in a way to exclude others? For example, I say, well, I'm accountable for this. Let me do it this way because I know this is the way we have to do it, and I'll come to the best outcome. I'm not sure that's an accountable leader. It's someone who might feel accountable. But have you ever encountered that at in organizational life, or
sure.
yeah?
Yeah. We do an excellent job hiring earlier in their career employees at our company. And one of the things I've learned through that journey is, I come to the table with 25 years of experience. In most situations, I'll know how to get things done, or I know what will fail or what will be more successful. But that's not how you teach people. You teach people through helping, through mentoring them, giving them some guidance, but a whole lot of room to figure it out on their own. And of course, I would never put somebody in a situation where it was so risky that if they failed, it would be, a situation where, they might not be at the company anymore or they would get in trouble. But as a leader, I've learned, let people just try it out. They'll come to their own conclusions and you'll be there to help guide them if they have questions. Um, so I think that you need to give people that runway. And, I have a team of wonderful individuals that span from earlier career to mid to more senior individuals. And we all take that approach to learning. And I have at other companies as well.
Isn't that amazing? Because it really says that accountability is not dictatorial. Accountability still requires you to involve others. And I think what the most successful managers know, and you've indicated this, is that there's usually not just one way to get things done. That people
Yeah.
bring their own ideas, and it's the job of the manager really to create alignment so that energies can be channeled and focused into efficiently and productively to organizational aims. But this ability to allow people to bring their smarts and their creativity, even to tasks that might seem mundane or repetitive, or tasks that you successfully have completed many times in your career. This idea of accountability also, I think, includes involvement and raising that standard, as the CARE acronym does, to talk about excellence.
Yeah. And look, I'm not going to say I get it right every day. And I mentioned earlier, I've been doing this for 25 years, and that has been a learning journey every single day. I was talking to one of my employees the other day about how I have changed around flexibility, about where people work and when they take time off. And we laughed about it because I've been at Xactly now for almost 6 years. And I'm different in some ways. I came into the company wanting to be different than I was at my last employer. But even through this last many years, I'm different. And I've learned so much from my own team in that way. They've been really helpful and supportive. And I think that's really important for leaders to know, is that, we often talk about being a learn-it-all at Xactly versus a know-it-all. And I really try to think about that every single day. I slip sometimes, maybe more times than not, but at least I'm more aware of it than I was in the past.
Well, isn't that the way that you really demonstrate respect for others as well, is to have this
Hmm.
approach of let's be a learn it all culture, that it empowers an individual, and it's trust in enough individual that they can accomplish and achieve just like you. And when we all achieve, we all rise.
Yeah, we do all rise. And, I tell folks all the time that, their great work on our team brings us all up. And we're all doing that consistently. We're raising and elevating the function and the company together. And it's tremendously powerful when you have that outlook, when you have that opinion about how work gets done, and you really seek to understand how other people can bring value to your company. We no longer talk about culture fit in a company or in our company. We talk about culture add. And what do you bring as an individual that will add a new element to our company, or a new skill, or a new perspective? Uh, and it's a very different mindset versus, in the olden days. How do you fit into our culture? It's really more around, what are you going to add?
Leanne, that's such a progressive point of view that I think many people and culture leaders still don't have. What you're describing essentially is that the pie isn't divisible only.
Hmm.
It's just one pie, and you get a slice and you get a slice and everybody gets a slice, and then it's all gone at some time. What I think you're describing is that the pie is expandable. You can, add to that. And I love how you're describing that in terms of your organization, that what can you add to this organization versus what can you take from it? And what's your
Hmm.
slice of the pie? How do you make the pie bigger for everyone? Yeah, that's an amazing framework that you have going there around these concepts of everyone a learner, around the concept of working fully and presently with the skills that you have. How do you work these bars of excellence, though? Because it's often very difficult. Some may say, oh, your standards are too high, or I'll never meet that bar. how do the standards of excellence come? Of course, they're going to come in how your customers reward you and treat you for your products and services. But how do we show up every day in an excellent way?
Well, for me, you know, setting the bar of excellence for everyone can, I think, be really intimidating. I like to look at it as incremental progress forward in everything that we do. And I think that's such a better way of talking about excellence than it is be excellent. Uh, Progress forward is always good. Incremental progress is excellent. And we talk about that in our processes, in our strategy, with our diversity goals. People always ask me, "What's the goal?" Well, the goal is progress forward, and we're going to continue to make incremental progress. We're going to have to do a lot of things and put many strategies in place to ensure that we're making progress forward. But that is positive. Movement positive is, forward movement is positive.
And that's what takes us beyond the last project too. It takes us away from, oh, you're only as successful as your last project,
Mm-hmm.
because the idea is around progress. And at least what I believe, and I think there's some research, Teresa Annabelle from Harvard, who talks about progress being the key to employee engagement, that having a sense of progress, that I'm contributing to this mission, I'm contributing to something larger than myself, I'm contributing to my team. That's what creates real engagement, is a sense of progress.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so much that we've settled at the end of the day, that the bank account is clear, but it's a sense that we're growing our deposits in one
Yeah.
another, and we're doing that with our customers as well. That's just amazing and totally awesome to have that perspective on excellence, and seeing it as the journey towards excellence, in addition to the outcome that both customers and employees want from each other.
Mm-hmm.
As you think about these concepts, culture, accountability, respect for diversity, respect for others, and excellence, how are they communicated in your organization? How does that how does an
Oh,
employee
yeah.
feel that?
Well, and it's been so wonderful. We've had so many employees join us this last 12, 18 months during the pandemic. And I was always curious and worried as to whether or not they would really get a good understanding as what our culture is. And they do, because they tell me this. So we integrate this in a number of ways. Certainly, as a candidate, you can see what our culture looks like and feels like by looking at our website. Generally, your first point of entry into our company is through the recruitment team. We're all very aligned. They have access to our core competencies. They know what they are. They talk to our candidates about them and how they're integrated into our company. Once you get into the company, we're very active in the community when it's safe to do so, and things are starting to open up where more and more individuals in our communities are able to go out into the communities where they work, live, and play, and invest some time volunteering. We offer several days off to volunteer. So that's definitely something that we share with our employees globally. We have a wonderful week every year that we dedicate to our core values. It's called Care Week. This year, it will be in the second week of September. And it is during this week that we spend an entire week focusing on each of those core values. We do it throughout the year, but this is a very special week where each day we focus on each of those letters of care. The last day of that particular week is a global day of giving. And we provide individuals opportunities to give back monetarily, or through the community outreach program that we have to volunteer in the community. And it's absolutely phenomenal. Last year was our first year doing it virtually, and I would have to say it was probably our best, because we didn't think of the ideas that we came up with last year because we weren't in a pandemic the prior year. We also do another really wonderful thing during that particular week where we have a nonprofit vendor fair in all of our key locations. This past year and this year, it was virtual. But we go into our communities, we bring forward to our employee population the opportunity to engage with these different community nonprofits and look for opportunities where they can contribute on their own. And it's phenomenal. So there's, just a couple of ways. There are many more, but you can kind of get a real feel for how integrated they are. In every all hands, we talk about them. Every new hire gets a blueprint of our core values, and so that they understand what they are. There are a number of things that we do to help people see what they are. And in every one of our buildings, the core values are front and center on one of the walls in our buildings.
It seems that consistency and alignment in so many of your messages is key to infusing this culture of care. It's not it doesn't sound like it's a one and done deal. What I also appreciate is just the consistency. I think I've heard that these values have survived over 16 years.
Yes.
And I think about values in some other organizations. What comes to mind? I think about in the in the Wayback Machine, we think about Enron, still a classic example of where integrity was the number one corporate value. And it certainly might have been on some walls in the Enron campuses, but it certainly wasn't in the halls. It wasn't part of the employee experience. We might even say that with a more recent example relative to Wells Fargo and what happened with integrity there. So I love the ways in which you're approaching this and doing it in, I think, probably what's a fairly deliberate fashion in order to create some great results and outcomes for others.
Well, and the other thing I should mention too is, and this would have been started 16 years ago and is still going strong. When our CEO, Chris Cabrera, started the company, set aside some money and put it into an Xactly One foundation. This is a 501c3 non-profit foundation. And every quarter, we seek input from our employees. We ask them, tell us what is important for you in your community. Where should we be donating these dollars to? And we have a wonderful process in place. They submit their ideas. We talk about it as a board, and we donate regularly every quarter into these communities. So that's another element. And we tell our employees where we've donated. We invite them to contribute to where we've donated. We let them know very publicly what and why we've done these things. We partner with organizations like Best Buddies. Best Buddies places employees with intellectual disabilities into companies. We have a wonderful gentleman that has been working with us from Best Buddies in 4 years, who is an absolute delight to have in our office. So there are so many different elements to this idea of care and care values that does, as you mentioned, goes beyond just a set of words that might go on a piece of paper or on a wall somewhere.
And Leanne, I think that's probably what distinguishes you and makes you such a wonderful HR leader at this moment in time. Because as I understand, you're really asking what's important to you. And that is a way of fostering engagement, fostering involvement, of fostering people in the mission of the organization. It's really pretty remarkable. As you think about it, you've worked in large organizations with tens of thousands of employees, and you've worked in organizations of a smaller size. You've worked with not-for-profit boards where the communities change and they grow and expand with different initiatives. How do you really begin to think about building this into your system? It sounds like it's a very active exercise. You've got a week that you focus on these values. You've got in your talent acquisition process, it's part of the way in which you onboard employees. It's creating this, what can you add to our culture? I mean, you really demonstrate a lot of consistency around this, it seems.
Well, look, I'm not the only one generating these ideas.
Yeah.
There is a lot of consistency, but this whole idea of Care Week came out of a Care Week or an innovation forum that we had. We had a gentleman who's no longer with the company who came to me with this phenomenal plan, and it was fantastic. And I said, you know what? Let's go for it. You tell me what you need. I will clear the roadblocks. And to be honest, I was a little intimidated at first because it was just this we're gonna do this for an entire week. We're gonna shut down a park. We're gonna do a 5 mile run. And that first year was phenomenal. And every year after that has been fantastic. So oftentimes these ideas come from within the company. I think that's another way to show that we care and that we want people to bring forward their ideas and look for executive sponsorship that will help them bring them to fruition. I mean, that's one thing. We do generate a lot of ideas amongst the senior staff, amongst the HR team members. I draw on my previous experiences. I certainly, you and I have known one another for 20 plus years.
Decades.
Yeah, a few days. I network extensively. And so I also, look to my network to generate a lot of these ideas. So I certainly can't take credit for everything, but, I love what I do. And that's the passion that I bring for my job. And I think that is also, bringing my authentic self to work. I mean, it comes through with the passion of the work that I do.
It goes back to these three core concepts that Jung pointed out, that the Swiss psychoanalyst, and that I refer to extensively in Integrity by Design. The first is you are what you do, not what you say you'll do. And I think this alignment, I love what I do. I think it gives evidence to that, right? That
Mm-hmm.
bring our we bring our progress, we bring our fulfillment when we are in love with what we do. And also, his second point, that the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. I mean, it resonates for me in this discussion with you. And that, his final observation is that we can't change anything unless we accept it. I mean, makes a pathway, I think, for what you're doing at Xactly with the care culture, with demonstrating what's possible for others. As we grow and develop and evolve in our careers, one thing I learned from an early mentor, Brendan Keegan, was that when you reach 50 years, and I don't know where anybody is among our guests and our listeners, but you've often seen so many events and organizations that you often know a pattern that may result or that may exist. In order to stay engaged, to be present, to bring our authentic selves to work, we still have to engage in what keeps us alive and active, and that is the capacity to learn. And if there's anything you're demonstrating, Leanne, in this conversation for our audience today, it is this tremendous capacity that you're demonstrating and that you're showing in your personal life and in your professional life and in your organization. It's this capacity to change and evolve and to grow, to say, I have learned and I am learning, and I'm going to add that learning back to our framework. Oh, that is a gift that you're bringing into the world.
Well, it may be a gift, but I won't always say it's easy. You mentioned a few minutes ago, you can't change anything unless you accept them, and you need to know about them. And there are a lot of wonderful people that I work with who bring to me things that might be in my, their blind spots. And so those are not always easy to accept. But I think if you get to a point where you can listen and you can hear them and you determine whether or not there's patterns, you can get to a point where you understand that, okay, this is an area I'm now hearing this from multiple people. I need to figure out how to change them. And you get to the point of exception or accepting them. And there's, of course, a lot of wonderful things that you can do to also supplement that through 360s and personal feedback from your teams, and honest feedback from your direct manager or your coworkers and your peers. But yeah, I think you're right. You can't change anything unless you accept them, and you need to know what those things are.
And just as we begin to wrap up, I mean, I think it's a lovely way of thinking about the challenges for authenticity and integrity. And that's realizing that it's not an end game in and of itself, that it is a journey. It's one in which we make progress. We do have to operate from a strong moral and ethical foundation. This is not always a relative exercise when it comes to the topic of integrity, but this willingness to engage with the other, to see that life can be richer and fuller, and that organizational outcomes can be better when we invite others to participate. And I don't think that's all that common in organizations. And I think it's one of the reasons, particularly as many people re-enter the workplace, why we need more authentic leadership in organizations, where we create these environments of trust, where we replace guarded and cautious communication with communications that is open and transparent, that we recognize our role as stewards to the community and to the organization that we serve, and that we have some fun doing this. And I think if there's anything that you've demonstrated, Leanne, in today's discussion on authentic leadership and authentic change, it's in the power of possibility, the power
Mm.
to see myself as something bigger than I am, and to realize, I think, as you said, that integrity and authenticity are not solo conversations or conversations I have with myself. They're only enacted when we engage with others. And it sounds like you're doing some amazing things at a company that many people would want to be part of. Leanne, as we begin to wind down, are there some key observations or insights that you would share with others relative to, building this congruent life? It's
Mm.
in it's in much of the work that you're doing at Xactly today.
Well, I think don't be afraid of the hard. That's one thing. And as difficult as it is to ask people for feedback, ask them for feedback. I have learned throughout my journey at this company, and I was talking to my boss about this the other day. Um, we have a very open conversation about a lot of things, and I'm not afraid to push back or ask for feedback or listen for advice. And a lot of people are, because they think the repercussion might be, oh, hey, things probably aren't really working out here, so why don't we just have you move on? That's a really hard place to get to with your manager. And we've worked on it as a leadership team. We've had some wonderful times together, and I think that's what makes the leadership team at Xactly so powerful. So don't be afraid of the hard. Uh, look for opportunities to be a learn it all, and make incremental steps if you're not already there, to bring your whole self to the office, because it's wonderful for you and it's wonderful for the people around you to see that in you, particularly as a leader.
I love all these ideas, Leanne, particularly as they're practical action steps, and they do require a reservoir of courage on which to draw. But this idea about don't be afraid of the hard, it reminds me of two elements that I think are so central to work of that authentic leaders do. Is they have to show that they care first, and
Mm.
then you have to do the work.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean relying on your successes from the past, but it's working now in order to achieve the outcomes and
Yeah.
desires that we have. Leanne, it's just so fabulous to hear your insights on the topic of integrity and working and living authentically, and for our audience to hear the successes and the challenges that you face and that you continue to lead through, and to encourage others on their journeys. Leanne, if our audience members or our listeners wanted to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Yeah, I think a couple of different ways, but probably the best way is on LinkedIn. Send me a LinkedIn and I'm happy to answer any questions that people might have. We are hiring a lot of people right now globally. We have a work from almost anywhere policy. So I think that for those people out there who are looking to work at the top SaaS company that focuses on revenue intelligence solutions, I think that Xactly is a perfect opportunity for you. And we're hiring, like I said, across the board, all different disciplines, and we'd love to have you.
That'd be so great. And I would encourage all of our listeners to visit the Xactly website. And for those of you who may be challenged relative to spelling that, exactly is X begins with an X.
Yes.
Yeah, spell it out for us.
Yes, it begins with an X, ACTLY.
.com, Xactly.com. So
Mm-hmm.
again, for our listeners, find Leanne on LinkedIn, visit her company's website at Xactly.com, and it'll be great ways to connect you to an organization where authenticity and integrity seems alive and well, and an organization full of opportunity for people, particularly those who are attracted to care, to the ideas about culture and accountability and respect for diversity and for excellence. I couldn't imagine a better place to be, or to have the opportunity to work with someone like Leanne, who's really leading great initiatives in people and culture at her company and designing the kind of organization where people can do their best work. It's been so delightful
Thank you.
it's so delightful to have Leanne Burns as a human resources and people and culture leader, working to advance organizations that do their best. And it's been a delight and an honor for me to have Leanne Bernhardt as a guest today on Authentic Change with Mike Horne. Until we speak again, listeners, I wish you well. And again, thanks to Leanne Bernhardt, Chief Human Resources Officer at Xactly Corporation. Everyone, thanks until next time. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll subscribe today and tell a friend about our show. If you're looking for hands-on help to increase your success through authentic change, or have a question you'd like to hear me answer here, please email me at mike@mike-horne.com.